Okay, so for Succession, Succession is obviously quite different from Awakening. You can actually use like all your skills and have probably like a 1 to 2 second gap where nothing's happening. You actually want to your hardest hitting skill in Succession is actually Ninjutsu Shadow Stomp. This thing hits super duper hard. The only problem is the conditions of getting this to work for you and do super hard damage. Reasons being its accuracy rating is super high, and also that additional hit damage is really extreme. And if you can get a decent amount of crit rate going on as well, this thing could absolutely just delete most things. But the problems is that you have to sort of get a Shadow Explosion before it, or somehow trigger the ninjutsu mark from Shadow Stomp the first time, because the only other ways you can get that mark is if you're doing a block jump, where you get this buff. It's also this Z icon that's floating around the Kuno there. Another one is the smoke screen is to get that buff, or either that hitting something with Shadow Stomp. So if you hit something with Shadow Stomp, then it'll get buffed. Otherwise, it won't really like trigger unless they change this. Yeah, so that's actually one of your strongest attacks. So one of the things I did was like, what you can do is to get the buff to get your Shadow Stomp to hit really hard in either PvE or PvP is like after generally either a grab or some kind of CC, you can actually Shadow Explosion into the floor. And if you hit something with Shadow Explosion on the floor, then you get the what the heck are those buffs called? You get the spirit buff. So you get the spirit buff when you hit something with this, and then you can just smoke screen straight into the Shadow Stomp, and then the Shadow Stomp will have that extra damage on it. So you probably want like something to give crit before that, either via ankle cutter or like crescent slash or something else, or even the Shadow Explosion. So you can just like blast into them. That's one of the things you want to do to get the maximum damage out for that. Otherwise, like your next strongest hitter would be a Wheel of Wrath. Wheel of Wrath has already 100% crit rate on it. If you're unable to raise your crit for whatever reasons, then you probably want to rely more on Wheel of Wrath, because it has that high accuracy rating as well, and it's 100% crit rate inherent. It's just that the second hit bonus damage requires all 3 marks to be hit on a target or generated on the Kuno some way. So you're gonna have to literally end up with either the Shadow Stomp Z thing, or either that, and then afterwards you have to use the Shadow Clone to get the other mark, and then you have to use the Shadow Explosion to mark, and then you can finally use Wheel of Wrath on the enemy to actually get all your marks up. So if you're trying to get all your marks up, so yeah, essentially it would be like a grab here, and then just like a Shadow Stomp there, and that's super damage right there. So obviously that happens so fast that even I didn't really see anything. so yeah. So it's a grab first, and then the Shadow Explosion, which you'll get this weird Ninjutsu Spirit Mark buff. And then if you do the smoke screen afterwards, you get the other buff here. And then you've got these tiny seconds to just get that Shadow Stomp gone on them. And notice like that's the amount of text that came out is probably vastly different than if I just did it without that. So it's missing about like 1 or 2 hits in there. And yeah, it was like a lot more words. So it's a lot more damage. So if you want the other buff for the Wheel of Wrath, then you're gonna have to hit them with all 3, so you get all 3 buffs up. That's kind of hard to do sometimes. And then you can either Wheel of Wrath the person or Danse Macabre them. If you Danse Macabre them, then you can actually like just pounce on somebody from like a mile away kind of thing, and just you know, it's really far. So if you're actually trying to really catch somebody and you have all 3 marks, you just sort of blink in and just like go all the way there. That's practically from like the training dummy on the other side there, and you can reach this person all the way here. So the mobility is pretty extreme, and you can also go through with this ankle cutter crescent slash foxclaw combo that I showed earlier in the pre-awakening parts. So that's another thing you can do. The only tricky thing is watching your combos, because if your ankle cutter's on combo, you won't get that blink effect on it. Same with Crescent Slash. You don't get that boost as well with Crescent Slash. If you actually really need to move like somewhere, then you would have to work Shadow Stomp somewhere in there as well with Shadow Slash and Shadow Stomp. So things can start getting like kind of really tricky or confusing after a while, where you're like trying to wonder like, what the heck am I supposed to do next to like move. But once you get into a warmed up rhythm and you get used to playing the class, then you can sort of work whichever way works out for you. All of them can sort of interchange between each other. You're not always like set to like one particular pattern. It's just more or less, it's hard to really explain it until you actually just jump into the class and just start doing it until you get used to it by muscle memory automatically. Alright, and then Flash Slash, you obviously generally want to use it with Smoke Screen. So that's another thing you can change around. It's just way faster. If you do it without Smoke Screen, it takes forever to like get anything off with Flash Slash. Otherwise, Tendon Cutter as well is also a blink somewhere. You can just blink around all over the place. You can also use it as sort of movement. If you sort of know the latch on range for the blink strike, then you also know like the extra distance you can cover with Tendon Cutter. So it's about like this far here, almost. It's just slightly closer. You gotta treat it sort of like an extra block jump. Like the range of it is like an extra block jump, which is about this far. So just about like the distance from like here to your target essentially. So maybe like slightly shorter than your Shadow Stomp range. Shadow Stomp is pretty long range, sort of, considering it also moves your character. And then like Tendon Cutter, you can obviously position yourself kind of closer, but depending on how you go with the Tendon Cutter in succession. So you can sort of like, if I'm standing here and I twist my camera like forward over there, then I can get over. But then the problem is locking onto the correct target, because you might lock onto something else and then you just sort of blast off into nowhere. And then you kind of getting confused, going like, oh, that's not where I was expecting to go. I was actually expecting to go somewhere else when I wanted to go here instead of over there. So yeah, you have to sort of really practice that if you want to get used to how to getting to your target properly. And obviously, like, Succession is a lot more bursty than Awakening. The only problem is that you lose a lot of mobility in Awakening, but you gain a lot more protections in mobility. And then in Succession, you just, like, you know, get in there, burst, and then get out kind of thing. So those are the trade-offs between the two. So if you want to like go Succession, burst damage is a much higher. You might have some WP problems, but not really if you tab Brace. And I think the new skill, Ankle Splitter, is probably pretty good. I don't know. I'm mostly like stuck with offense here because it's actually really fast. What the hell? Very long cooldown, but yeah, definitely something I want to use. The other one here is Assassin's Trail. So this is actually probably far more applicable in Succession than it is in Awakening. So Assassin's Trail, you can actually just drop this for an iframe kind of thing and then go straight into a Shadow Stomp, and that sort of gets your marks up and triggered. And since Shadow Stomp is on such a short cooldown, you can sort of gauge it or whatever and then get this other buff and then just blast it with additional damage and get this middle buff or whatever. And then if you get that middle buff, then you can probably buff up your Succession for the Ghost plus Soul Explosion, which gives your Shadow clone a bleeding effect later on down the road. But it rarely ever happens because of the cooldowns of Shadow clone being so long, and that buff is only like 15 seconds or something like that, or 20 seconds. So there's like a 6-second window where you'll trigger the ninjutsu effect, which it causes bleeding for 90 damage every 3 seconds. This stacks with like skill add-on bleedings as well. So it's really powerful if you can get it off on somebody. You're practically disabling their HP pot almost. But so the conditions to make it happen is so wildly like unrealistic that it'll almost never happen. So don't worry too much about that. Just try and use it as an extra buff to get your 3 marks up, and then just you know, style on your enemy by dancing on them with Danse Macabre or blasting them with Wheel of Wrath. Either one, as the ninjutsu for Shadow Clone will almost never happen. So, alright, and that's kind of like, Succession isn't like that bad. It's just more or less getting your smokescreen cancels down. So you can cancel into smokescreen with Ghost Screening. You can cancel into smokescreen right after Ankle Cutter right here. You can also cancel into smokescreen right after Crescent Slash. You can also cancel into smokescreen after the extra last hit in Tendon Cutter. You can cancel into smokescreen after Fox Claw. Also do smokescreen after Shadow Explosion. You can also do it after Fatal Blow. And that's kind of it. Like, you can almost cancel a lot of things into smokescreen. And then from out of smokescreen, you can either choose to go Shadow Stomp, or you can use massive AoE like Flash Slash and just hit everything around you instead. Either one. Or either that, you can just go into concealment and then you can just boost forward and sort of lose the position of where you are. And also, you can use that with the Sinew Cut. I believe you can also... oh, no, you can't. Okay. And yeah, so that's pretty much it. That's pretty much it for Succession. It's obviously just getting like the marks down for either Danse Macabre, all three, or Wheel of Wrath, or either that getting your Prime Shadow Stomp to just blast something into oblivion. One of the other things is like trying to hit your target with Shadow Stomp and going straight into Fatal Blow. But the problem is that you might either blow past them and then you'll miss your Fatal Blow, or either that you'll be too short and you won't hit them with Fatal Blow. So either way, the main reasons is, again, trying to get those air attacks in, because that's the hardest modifier in the game to land, is to hit enemies in the air with it. It's really difficult. You have to really know the distance of how you're going to fly forward with Shadow Stomp. Once you do that, then you can use Shadow Clone afterwards, because you'll still have enough time to use Shadow Clone after to bounce your enemy on the floor. It's just that, are you gonna get those air attacks, or are you gonna do it a different way with like Crescent Slash, for instance, or something that lifts them? Is the other way, because getting those air attacks is really difficult and also does a lot. So that's probably why you want to do those. You can probably do like Crescent Slash into like that, and then still get some air attacks, only the first hit but not the second one. But Foxclaw will also do air attacks, so that's why you want to cancel Crescent Slash into Foxclaw. But then again, you need like probably skill add-on attack speed buffs to actually make that all connect, because the time framing for a floating is super duper short. Even with like Shadow Stomp, you still have to turn your camera and aim at the target fast enough if you really want to do something like that for the air attacks, because the second hit will almost never connect if you're not fast enough. And even me showing on here, like the second hit is just regular criticals, there's no air attack going on. And yeah, that's pretty much it. You can get a lot of damage out like that, and that's just fitting in extra damage in between. That's pretty much it. Otherwise, like, you know, these are just guide stepping stones. You can obviously figure different things out yourselves. I've seen other crazier Kunoichis out there that probably play a lot better than I do. So, you know, there's other masters out there. I'm sort of just a plebeian. And then, yeah, so we'll go into Awakening next. Okay, so for Awakening, there's been a lot of changes since like the last video that I made about Awakening, which was like some years back. Awakening is vastly different now these days. It's very different. It's actually a lot more smoother than what it used to be, because like skills like Flow Wrath, for instance, used to be really clunky. So that comes out way faster. There used to be like a super weird long delay before you could actually throw out Wrath. Indignation used to only be able to come off a Wheel of Wrath, and that was like kind of crappy, because there was only one way to perform it back then, and they added different ways for to trigger this, which is so much better now. This thing hits really hard, so I'm just gonna go through the skills here. Salisbury of Sonnen is still really like absolute crap. I don't know why. It's just shit. Even with a high crit rate, this thing is still really like ugh. Lunar Dash, you should definitely max this out because it just, I believe it lowers the cooldown, right? Yeah, it lowers the cooldown, and this is part of your movement combo with Awakening, so you want this like as soon as possible. This is just way too good to ignore. Grants you a tiny bit of a DP as well, and that lowers the cooldown down to 4 seconds, which is really, really good. This second hit here, Chakram Rise, should kind of take it. It does help with damage. It hits really, really hard. It's got a 100% crit rate, and also grants you 10 AP. Stacks with like other buffs too, and also one of the easier ways to get an AP buff out in Awakening without having to do like a block jump or something like that. So that's also highly sought after. Half Moon Slash, one of your main staples of constant DPS, and you'll be using it a lot. Mostly to get behind your enemy for back attacks on PvE mobs or PvP, or that used in super armor, so it's got minor protections for like half a second or like a second or so. And you can also put like skill add-ons like I have there to constantly trigger it, since you'll be using it so much. Even though it's like a low tier skill add-on, I have it on anyways, just because like it practically gives a buff out forever. Delighted Blast, maybe not as important as like Lunar Dash and Half Moon Slash there. Delighted Blast is like an extra spare damage that just comes out of nowhere. You just toss it at the enemy and it explodes. So that's not really a problem. But even then, it's not as sought after as I would say Spin to Win. So Lethal Spin Spree, what they did was they added an extra rotation into this, so you can actually spin longer than usual. I think the timing for this spin is almost like 1.8 seconds, and it's got an 8-second cooldown at maximum at level 60. So basically there's like a 6-second gap sort of in there where you're not spinning. And in that 6-second gap, you have to throw in like everything else. Maybe not 1.8 seconds. This seems kind of longer than usual. Is it 1.8 seconds? I don't actually know. 1002. Oh yeah, it is like about 1.8 seconds. Okay, no, I should trust myself. Yeah. So yes, Spin Spree. This is pretty much like signature staple of all Kuno Awakenings. They just added in the core skills where you can add a special effect. I probably will put it back onto the Spin Spree because having stiffness on this thing was just way too good for both PvE or PvP. And it's just like a lot of things you essentially don't have to deal with if this thing had its stiffness CC back in on it, which is insanely good. Otherwise, other choices would be like the Half Moon or the you could turn Sorcery of Sonnen into a forward guard blocker, or Wheel of Wrath could have its forward guard again, because this thing does big damage. Wheel of Wrath is again very, very powerful in Awakening as well. It's got a high accuracy rating, it's got a lot of damage, and it hits twice, and it flows into Indignation and Wrath. Flow and Wrath should be picked up whenever you can and used whenever you can, because these things both hit really hard in PvE. For PvP, maybe not so much, but for Indignation, for PvP, this is kind of your only way of using a knockdown CC on somebody. So if you're able to trigger this off onto somebody, they'll be on the floor for quite a while. Flow, Wrath, and Indignation can flow off of each other between, you can either go Wrath into Indignation or Indignation into Wrath. The only things that trigger into it is Spin Spree into Wrath, or Wheel of Wrath into Indignation, or rather that Danse Macabre into Wrath or Indignation is the ways you can trigger Flow and Wrath. So you can go between like Danse Macabre into Wrath, and then straight into Indignation, or Danse Macabre into Indignation and then Wrath. So they're interchangeable between which one comes first, so that's why you should probably have cooldown icons on your screen so you know which one's available, so you're not left clicking or right clicking at the wrong moments. Chain Crash has been changed greatly since back then as well, is because you can spam this as much as you want now. This thing is great for PvE. It does full damage on PvE, and they added a crit rate to it, so it's really, really strong. It kind of sucks for PvP. It's really lackluster for PvP because it leaves you wide open as well, and it doesn't have that super armor effect like it did suit a long time ago. That's been moved into its Black Spirit Rage form. You can also cancel into Danse Macabre, so if you're actually going to use this in an applicable PvP situation, for instance, you could probably try and debate your target by like showing them that you're wide open, but then if you use Danse Macabre, you get some super armor out of that. So super armor and invincibility, so you can cancel Chain Crash out of it immediately with a Danse Macabre and just go instantly forward. And if you land on your target, well then, you know, they'll be debuffed with the Danse Macabre debuffs, but minus 20%, 20%. And then you can surprise them with a motherfucker chop as indignation and knock them down into the floor if they're not protected immediately after that. If you're somehow able to hit something and stun them with this, then yeah, it's going to be even worse for them, essentially. And yeah, so Halo as well, you should use this as sort of like your Awakening's ankle cutter. It's not as effective as ankle cutter, but it still makes them lose 15 DP instantly. And you can use that after anything, really. It's like Warrior's armor break, essentially, but for Kuno, it's just like this echo tap. You can use this almost anywhere, spam it whenever you want. You can also use this as a block too. You gotta remember that when you use Halo, there's a block on it. I think it's always on. I think it's always a forward guard. I don't think it's forward guard even when it's off cooldown. Yeah, this is always a forward guard, I believe. I thought it was only when it was off cooldown. But in any case though, like I use this to like trade with mobs too that hit really, really hard, say for Ash Forest for instance, or Olan's Valley. So sometimes if I like screw up and I see an attack like about to wallop my Kuno, then I just like tap spacebar and try to hit the target at the same time it's about to hit me, because that forward guard is very, very short. It's only lasts for like a second and a half or something like that. It's not like an S block that's like up forever, so the block is very short. Just be wary of that. And then block jump, this might not be taken with most Kunos in Awakening, because especially if you're PvPing, if you're block jumping in Awakening, it operates vastly different than it would in pre-Awakening. This block jump, one of the things is because if you unspec this, then when you block jump, it's a weapon switch, and if you weapon switch straight to pre-Awakening and you land behind your target, you can grab immediately. So it saves that extra overhead of you having to figure out which stance you're in, and whenever you do a block jump, you know you're immediately going into pre-Awakening, so you can grab right away. Because you can't grab in Awakening. Awakening, if you press E, you just turn on your E buff. And yeah, that's kind of it. Lunatic Discus, they changed how this operated as well. This thing just hits like multiple times. I don't know if it's actually stronger or weaker than before, but what you need to know is that you can also cancel into Danse Macabre in the middle of it. So if you throw this around, you can just Danse Macabre in it. Wait, that was the wrong attack. And there's also a tiny forward guard in front. Before you release the discus, it actually does work. It's not non-existent. I've had it happen multiple times, and I was actually really confused because I thought they removed the forward guard on it. But at the beginning of the attack, before the disc leaves your hand, there is a short forward guard in there. But the moment the disc leaves your hand, then you lose that forward guard. It's gone. But yeah, you also can cancel it with the Danse Macabre attack as well, so you can do that and just teleport to where your disc is. That's another strategy you can use that also wasn't available back then. Again, if you want to do crazy shit, you can also yo-yo your screen with mouse movement by like this and just hit everywhere. That's kind of wild, but also a lot of extreme overhead. Probably works better if you've got hardware advantages like 4K resolution, which is kind of nutty, but I don't. I'm playing on 1080p. And then same with this, you can like whip that around all over the map with the Lunatic Discus, maybe like semicircles everywhere. It does cause CC of knockback only in PvP, and if you just whip it into somebody with mouse movement like that, it will cause it as well. So you can do that and also still go into them if you're fast enough. I'm not fast enough anymore. I'm just old, like 96 years old now, so it doesn't work anymore. And then so this is like, you know, forward guard to the lunar dash, probably good for engagements if you really feel like you need that defense. This stiffness is pretty good, to be honest, considering how often this triggers every 3 seconds. Stiffness on this is pretty wild. So every 3 seconds there's a stiffness. Forward guard, Wheel of Wrath. Yeah, that one maybe, because this thing hits really hard, and if you can use this as a block to just counter somebody, you can launch them instead in the middle of their attack and then just be completely confused. Or stiffness on good one hit, which I think is still pretty good because it's only on the first spin. On the extra rotation, I don't think there will be stiffness on this, but either way, this looks really, really good to me. I don't really care. One way or another, you can use this as a counter one, which is really good. Or you could turn Sauce Sasori Sonin into a forward guard for the whole duration, and this thing is like really long. That's almost like a 2-second forward guard. And then Delighted Blast super armor while using this skill. This skill is pretty long. I don't know if that super armor lingers all the way through to the end where you're sort of like kneeling on the floor for a while. That's almost like a 1 to 2 second super armor if it actually bleeds all the way through, so something to consider. Overall, I would say like all of these are pretty good if you want to like try all of them. But for me, I'm gonna take the spin to win because I don't know, I just like turning off brain and just spinning and not having to deal with someone's desync or like a mob desync or whatever, or like mobs that can susceptible to stiffness and I didn't know, and then they just run into that and get stiffened. So that's what I'm gonna go with. And that's pretty much it for Awakening. You probably want to work that in with a lot of the pre-awakening stuff in the earlier parts of the video. You just want to use all of those things put together and you'll have Kunoichi in a nutshell. It is a lot of handwork. It can get really messy. You can get all your skills practically out almost, and then have like a lot of skill icons in the way, which is really problematic for Awakening. But you can go full rotation essentially forever on Awakening. For Succession, you can actually throw out almost all your skills and have like a 1 to 2 second gap where you have to fill it in with like crappy skills that sort of do nothing. That's one of the other problems with Succession. But nonetheless, I'm pretty sure they might do something to Succession as well later on down the road, since they're like touching up on Awakening so much lately that I'm pretty sure they're gonna add something into Succession later on. I don't think they're just gonna let it be ignored and stay that way, so just keep an eye out for those who are more attuned to Awakening again, because so far the trend of the game has been like, oh, you start with pre-Awakening, then they gave you Awakening, then everybody moved to Awakening, then they moved to Succession. Succession was like really good for a while, and then they started buffing up Awakenings to match Succession, and then now Awakening has like more features than Succession, and then, you know, so it's like going back and forth, but it's still like they're trying to make it a decent choice between the two playstyles. I would say between Succession and Awakening, they're still fairly balanced. I think Awakening is slightly like lopsided a little bit better right now, but otherwise like Succession still wins in the burst department, and Awakening damage is more like consistent and constant rather than like huge bursts that Succession possesses for Kunoichi, and that's pretty much it. So I hope this video helped you out. I know it was really long. Thanks so much for watching and making it all the way up to here. I guess, you know, subscribe and like and whatever, share it with your friends. Help me out, helps you out if it helped you out. Otherwise, yeah, I'll catch you guys later. Your encouragement means everything to me, and that's pretty much the motivator for me to consistently keep doing these things, even though if I haven't posted sometimes because I have way too much work in IRL. But again, thanks so much. I'll see you guys next time, and peace. Take it easy. This dude's face is huge. I wish I was that huge. In the chest and the booty. No. Anyways. Alright, so one thing I forgot to go over is the skill add-ons. So for skill add-ons, I probably want to take, for Succession, the skill add-ons probably on Shadow Explosion to do with crit, because this thing has like no crit. Would be one of the good choices, I believe. But you don't use this skill very often though, but Explosion, and then like either like evasion down or DP down or down attack bonus, depending on where you're grinding or what you're doing. Because this thing also procs a lot of hits, you could probably put down smash on it too and cause like extra CC, because this thing hits so many freaking times on the floor. Is probably gonna like high chance of triggering. Those are some options that you might want to consider. It's like a tier 2 skill add-on effect, but honestly I feel like the crit damage is very useful here, and as well the down attack damage, because mostly I'm just doing PvE anyways at the moment, so I'll probably take this. And then for Shadow Stomp is probably part of like my usual usage of attacks, so I'll keep this as is, either this or increased attack speed and move speed. Probably attack speed, because I just want damage to come out faster. This is used very often, and it doesn't really have its own crit rate, and I don't want to rely on Shadow Explosion to proc the crit rate, so I'll give it to itself as well. And then Ankle Cutter, this is really powerful, so I kind of want to stack more negative DP on it. So the negative DP on Ankle Cutters will stack with this skill add-on. They're in its own categories, so just keep that in mind. Maybe even like further reduce defenses on enemy by making them lose evasion. I have this as well for Awakening. And then because you get another 3 choices in succession for your pre-awakening skills, essentially. I thought about Shadow Clone, but because ever since they revamped this, I'll probably put this into something more like Fox Claw, because it's got like a wide AoE kind of thing, and probably like a bonus accuracy and maybe attack speed, or like damage against monsters or PvP damage, I don't really know, or even just a bleeding effect because the AoE is so big. Otherwise, you could also try your chance at CCing a target, but it doesn't hit very many times. It only hits like twice. So probably not the down smash or air smash things unless you want to roll the dice for yourself. Or critical damage bonus, assuming your attacks have high crit. Those are some other choices, or just move speed bonus for yourself so you can get to places faster. Or crit rate, because this thing doesn't have crit rate itself either. But I'm gonna go with just evasion, so this can be an accuracy and evasion buffer. And then Tendon Cutter, we leave this with crit rate and the attack speed because I need something to boost attack speed anyways. And then Black Moonlight is very high, it's a T3 skill, but the chances are of you using it is kind of low, or either that you have to remember to use it a lot and very often, which might not occur as much to you. It's also a long cooldown, so you might want to change this, it's up to you. But Tendon Cutter should definitely be put on it, Ankle Cutter as well, and Shadow Stomp for sure are the 3 skills you should definitely have some skill add-ons on. The rest are sort of like optional. Shadow Explosion again is really long cooldown, same with like Black Moonlight. Fox Claw, you can spam this indefinitely, so you can always proc this buffs for yourself. If this doesn't really work out, I might not even need the defense if I'm doing this for PvE, and probably put damage on this instead. Is another option, or just attack speed to keep attack speed up high and good. Those are some options with skill add-ons. Obviously these are all like preference, you can just experiment, but these are what I'm going with for now for Succession. And then alright, and for Awakening add-ons, we have here Fox Claw. This is what I use on Awakening at the moment. I'm actually more familiar with Awakening at the moment. I'm out of practice with Succession for a little bit. So like Fox Claw, I just have like attack speed, crit rate, just because Fox Claw doesn't have crit rate and attack speed is always nice. Ankle Cutter, almost the same thing as Succession, just a lot of DP and defense loss. Tendon Cutter, attack speed and accuracy, because like you can rotate all the skills, so basically just to keep the attack speed up, because you can rotate all the skills really quickly in Awakening. Spin Spree, because you use it practically all the time. I also have this with DP minus in case I'm not spamming Ankle Cutter for whatever reason, because it's kind of hard to switch between and trying to keep the opportunities of the enemy always DP minus. Chain Crash is a T3 skill add-on, so I have this as monster damage and crit damage plus 5%. This boost is only for 5 seconds, so most of the time I only have like realistically like 3 seconds to use the buff on like any other skill, which would most likely be Spin to Win, because it's mostly just there to buff Spin to Win. Spin to Win is 100% crit, so if crit damage plus 5%, it'd just be buffing Spin Spree. So Spin Spree, attack speed ups to speed it up and also to lower the defense as well, and then like against monsters is bonus damage, so it does even harder on Spin Spree. That's the main reason, and this is also a spammable skill for the Chain Crash is why I have it, and it's a T3 again skill add-on, which is a huge boost. Half Moon Slash is a T1 skill add-on, so it's very low, but I just try to keep the crit rate up, and also for back attack damage, because this is the skill where you're sort of moving around to the back of enemies anyway, so by the time you use your next skill, it'll have a 2% back attack damage bonus. Don't really want to put like monster damage or anything else like that on there, so that's why I have Half Moon Slash for that. And essentially, you know, that's sort of what you get with this combination afterwards. Tendon Cutter is mostly a weapon switch here, so that's why I also leave this on as well. Ankle Cutter, DP minus 15, evasion minus 4, Fox Claw, critical rate. This thing has Chain Crash has critical rate against PvE, I think, of 50%. Anyways, so I don't really want to raise crit rate on this as well, so because it already has 50%, and that crit rate is given by Half Moon Slash. So in conclusion, that's pretty much everything, guys. One of the other things I want to mention with the skill add-ons is that if you have identical effects, such as like crit rate, for instance, Half Moon Slash has this crit rate here, 10%, for instance, right? But if I use Fox Claw of critical rate plus 20%, then this will override Half Moon Slash. So the next time I use Half Moon Slash, I'm not gonna get a 10% critical bonus rate. I'm gonna get that Fox Claw plus 20% still counting down to 0 before this can trigger. So you want to keep that in mind, where you don't have overlapping effects where the higher one overrides the bottom one and then the bottom one will never trigger. Essentially, that works the same for damage over time dots or whatever. So if you put like bleeding on all your attacks, you're not gonna get like 7 stacks of bleeding on somebody. You're just gonna get the highest one available. So if you have a T3 150 bleeding, for instance, on a target, and then you have all your other skills at like 100 and below, well, if you tag that one with the 150, all those other ones with the 100 bleeding will do absolutely nothing until that 151 finishes ticking off. So it won't refresh the 151, and it won't override it or erase it either with the lower buff, because you're sort of just, that's just sort of how it works. So something to keep in mind. So you don't want to have overlapping effects. You either want to have exactly identical, like word for word effects. If it's exactly the same, like attack speed, cast speed like this, 7%, 7%, they'll refresh. But if any of them is lower or higher, higher will override, lower will not trigger until the higher effect has finished ticking off. So that's sort of like how it works. It seems like a lot of people didn't seem to understand this in older videos. And like, if you don't believe it, then don't. Just swap the skills around and go experiment and check it out yourself. I'm just telling you what I've seen operate and occur, and if you don't want to believe it, you have every option to go into game and try it out yourself, okay? This is just a guide, it's not an absolute, okay? They could change things down the road. Next week's patch, they could just fuck over what I just said today. So who knows, okay? But you know, to your benefit, I hope that you'll keep that in consideration. And I hope you'll also discover new things that even I don't know about the class, because even after so many hours and years of playing Kuno, there's still things that I do like pepegadly. I still do jumps of shame every now and then, okay? It just happens. Sometimes I just play lazily. Sometimes I play way too hardcore, okay? It's a variant range of experiences. So I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I hope you'll take care, and please hope you learned something from this and it helped you out. If not, then I'm so sorry, but I'll see you next time. Peace.